An African country that has been touted as a copper belt has lifted off its shackles of debt and loosened its tightened noose on foreign financial institutions. In 2020, during the pandemic that ravaged some economies, Zambia, the second largest copper producer in Africa, was one of the countries on the brink of default and had a $12 billion external debt loan. Eventually, it became the first African country to default on its Eurobond loan payments, which resulted in the global S&P agency credit rating declaring the country in default. On 31st August 2022, Zambia pledged commitment to negotiate and restructure its country's debt, which prompted the IMF to extend a $1.3 billion 38-month credit facility. However, that bailout was conditional. IMF Managing Director Kristalina, in welcoming the $1.3 billion facility, stated that Zambia's economy needed a fiscal adjustment under the comprehensive debt treatment within the G20 common framework to restore debt sustainability. Despite the commitment to debt sustainability, Zambia's debt was deepened, which led to the country being regarded as a colony of the China-Dealt diplomacy, as China became the country's largest official bilateral creditor. It's been alleged that the protracted negotiations to restructure Chinese debt have been repeatedly forestalled by China. On June 2023, Zambia, under its new hailed president, marked a historic deal after the president shrewdly negotiated a $6.3 billion debt restructure at the Global Finance and Climate Summit in Paris, France, which saw France's President Emmanuel Macron playing a pivotal role. In the agreement, it's alleged to have debt maturity extensions over 20 years with a 3-year grace period and low interest payments. The Zambian debt restructure has been lauded and set as a precedent for other African countries such as Ethiopia and Ghana to emulate in the debt burden or to China. Here's what the Zambian president had to say about the expedition of the G20 framework processes, also on the non-polarization of Europe and Africa in terms of the extraction of raw materials and value addition of electric vehicles. And lastly, on the exportation of conflict.
One of the lessons of our debt restructuring that is applicable to poverty reduction, to climate change, is the issue around speed at which we do things. G20 framework, when we took office 21 months ago, this discussion was already in train. Now we've been in office 21 months. Yes, we're very pleased that it happened yesterday. But for the countries that are coming after us, there's need to expedite the processes. Just that, whether it's, if you like, energy transition, as Senegal is involved in that, we must just be conscious of time. Every day we don't deliver these things that are within our control, we are basically increasing the costs and the damage gets compounded. I think it's very important. The next lesson I want to suggest here, relevant to the subject on the table, is that German Chancellor's point yesterday at dinner, repeated today, is so important for us as a global community to mobilize resources, yes, but these resources must be invested to help grow the economies of the less developed countries. Very important, because by doing that, we are creating capacity in those economies to mitigate against climate change and obviously poverty reduction. So value addition, not just with the electric vehicle industry that is coming through, huge industry. It is important, President Macron, that we look at deliberately investing in extraction, critical minerals, for example, in value adding these minerals in country. Obviously, that will help the growth side of the GDP, create jobs, business opportunities for the transactional chain in there, if I may call it that. So I think this must be deliberate. These are requirements, these are needs, these are minimums. And it will mutually benefit, as somebody said yesterday, not to polarize the conversation, the North and the South. It will definitely, if it's structured properly, benefit the North, the South. And that's not the debate we must be engaging in, but mutuality for greater good, for a safe world, for a world that we can pass on to the next generation. But the thing is now to pull all this in one basket, draw an action plan, which is time-bound, and we get the job done. Lastly, on the issue of conflict, we cannot achieve what we want to achieve if we allow our global community to focus time, resources, everything, technology, on conflict. I think there's a duty for us all to keep our individual countries peaceful, out of conflict, and not export instability to other countries, neighboring or far away. As we now know, instability anywhere is instability everywhere. I think it's very important that we work on that issue and focus the resources, focus the time, and all the other capital provisions on the development agenda to mitigate climate change, to reduce poverty. And I must also indicate here, the cost of capital must sit in this basket, that it must be lowered. The inequity around the cost of capital, Africa, for example, pays the highest cost of capital, is not correct. It doesn't help anybody at all. It just worsens the situation. We must address this situation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.